At 80 years old, Eric Clapton is finally letting the world know the truth about his bond with George Harrison, and the story starts way before fame ever found him. Please subscribe. It means a lot to me and costs you nothing. Born Eric Patrick Clapton on March 30th, 1945 in Ripley, Surrey, his childhood was already a plot twist waiting to explode. He spent his early life believing his grandparents were his parents, and the woman he thought was his sister was actually his mother. That revelation hit him like a punch to the chest, and you can feel that emotional weight in every note he ever played. From the moment he got his hands on a guitar, something inside him locked onto the sound of the blues like it was calling his name. He fell deep into records by Robert Johnson, Muddy Waters, and B.B. King, studying them like sacred blueprints. Those legends didn't just inspire his style, they shaped who he became, turning him into the guy who mixed raw American blues with British rock swagger, creating a sound nobody else could touch. Clapton first shook the scene in the early 1960s with the Yardbirds, a band leading the British blues revolution. But when the group shifted toward a more pop-heavy vibe, Clapton walked away in 1965, refusing to let anyone pull him away from the music he loved. He wasn't chasing charts, he was chasing truth, and that stubborn dedication became one of the most iconic things about him. After leaving the Yardbirds, Clapton teamed up with John Mayall and the Blues Breakers, and that's where he earned the nickname Slowhand, a title fans still shout today. He carved out his place as a guitarist with crazy precision, deep emotion, and a style that felt like a conversation with your soul. Every riff showed who he was and what he had survived. Then, in 1966, Clapton helped create the powerhouse trio Cream with Jack Bruce and Ginger Baker, and suddenly, rock music didn't have rules anymore. Cream mixed heavy blues, wild improvisation, and psychedelic energy into something electric, and tracks like Sunshine of Your Love and White Room blasted his reputation into the stratosphere. His solos were bold, fiery, and fearless. He was finally stepping into the spotlight like he owned it. Even though Cream only lasted 2 chaotic years, the impact they left behind was huge. Arguments, clashing egos, and creative battles tore them apart. But those moments also cemented Clapton as a global rock icon and one of the first true guitar heroes. And he wasn't done. After Cream ended, Clapton joined forces again, building the supergroup Blind Faith with Steve Winwood, Ginger Baker, and Rick Gretsch, proving he wasn't afraid to keep pushing boundaries. Blind Faith only dropped 1 album, but that single project still hit the world with classics like Can't Find My Way Home, a song people still play when they need something real. Even though the band didn't last long, the whole experience showed how restless Clapton was as an artist, always chasing a new sound, a new feeling, something deeper than whatever everyone else was doing. He kept moving, kept experimenting, and that hunger pushed him into collabs with Delaney and Bonnie, and later, Derek and the Dominoes, the group behind the legendary 1970 album Layla and Other Assorted Love Songs. That album became one of rock's deadliest masterpieces, no question. The title track, Layla, came straight from Clapton's heartbreak. He was in love with Pattie Boyd, who was married to his friend George Harrison, and that emotional mess turned into one of the most intense love songs ever recorded. The riff bites, the emotion bleeds, and the whole track feels like someone tearing their heart open in real time. But behind the fame, Clapton was dealing with heavy struggles during the 1970s, fighting off addiction issues that nearly wrecked both his life and career. His battles with substance dependency took him to dark places, but he eventually pulled himself back with help from his circle and his own determination. When he spoke openly about those struggles, people saw another side of him, not the guitar god on stage, but a man dealing with real problems and trying to claw his way back to the light. That vulnerability changed how fans saw him, reminding everyone that behind the legend stood someone human, learning and surviving. Then came the 1980s and beyond, a time when he reinvented himself artistically, but also faced devastating heartbreak in his personal life. In 1991, Clapton experienced the tragic loss of his young son, Connor, a moment that shook his entire world. From that pain, he created Tears in Heaven, a gentle, heartbreaking song that touched millions across the globe. The melody carried his grief, and the lyrics spoke to anyone who had ever lost someone they loved. It wasn't just a tribute to his son. The song became a bridge for people dealing with their own pain, showing how Clapton used music to heal and to help others heal too. Across the decades, Clapton teamed up with an entire lineup of musical giants: George Harrison, Bob Dylan, J.J. Cale, B.B. King, and plenty more. His range let him glide through blues, rock, pop, and even reggae without losing his signature authenticity. His cover of Bob Marley's "I Shot the Sheriff" showed how he could step into a completely different vibe and still make it feel genuine and timeless. No matter how far he wandered stylistically, his blues foundation kept everything grounded and real, giving his music a type of soul that couldn't be faked. And woven through all those years was his personal life, full of friendships, heartbreaks, and unexpected twists, especially the bond he formed in the late 1960s with George Harrison, a connection that eventually turned into one of the wildest stories in rock history. Their bond wasn't some casual rock star friendship. It was a real connection built on respect, talent, and that rare creative chemistry artists chase their whole lives. Harrison brought Clapton into his inner circle, trusting him enough to let him play guitar on Beatles tracks like "While My Guitar Gently Weeps," a moment fans still talk about today. The two of them spent long nights trading ideas, experimenting with sounds, and pushing each other to levels they might not have reached alone. But behind all that creative magic, Clapton was wrestling with a heavy secret. He had fallen deeply in love with George Harrison's wife, Pattie Boyd. She was a model, a muse, and the woman who had already inspired Harrison's hit, Something, and Clapton found himself caught in a storm of passion he couldn't turn off. His feelings for Pattie turned into both fuel and pain, and that emotional chaos spilled into his music, especially in Layla, where he poured out his heartbreak in every note. Everything shifted years later when Harrison and Boyd's marriage fell apart, ending in divorce in 1977. Once the dust settled, Clapton and Boyd finally stepped into the relationship that had been simmering in the shadows for years. On March 27, 1979, in Tucson, Arizona, they got married, giving fans and media the ending they had been watching unfold like a real-life rock drama. For Clapton, after fighting addiction, heartbreak, and years of longing, this felt like a win and a fresh start. But marriage wasn't the perfect picture people imagined, and reality hit hard. Clapton and Boyd wanted to build a family, but things didn't go the way they hoped, bringing them painful challenges behind closed doors. They suffered multiple miscarriages, a heartbreaking cycle that left them emotionally drained and searching for answers. They even turned to medical science, trying in vitro fertilization in 1984, a tough, demanding process at the time, but that attempt also ended in disappointment, leaving both of them devastated. While their marriage was weighed down by the struggle to become parents, Clapton made choices that would change everything. He started an affair with Italian model and actress Lori Del Santo, a decision that shook his life in ways he couldn't escape. From that relationship came a son, Connor, born on August 21, 1986, a child who brought genuine joy into Clapton's complicated world. But even with that happiness, Connor's birth delivered a painful hit to his marriage, pushing his relationship with Boyd into territory it couldn't recover from. When Boyd discovered Clapton's affair and the fact that he had a child with Lori Del Santo, her whole world cracked open. The betrayal hit her so hard that their marriage simply couldn't survive it. By 1989, their relationship finally collapsed, ending a union that once looked like the final chapter of one of rock's wildest and most talked about love stories. Then tragedy struck Clapton's life in a way that would change him forever. His young son, Connor, lost his life in a devastating accident on March 20th, 1991, leaving Clapton shattered beyond anything words could describe. The heartbreak from that moment became a turning point in his life, reshaping both the man and the music in ways fans could feel deep in their chest. Out of that unbearable pain, Clapton poured his grief into Tears in Heaven, a soft and heartbreaking song that carried the weight of a father trying to understand the unthinkable. The melody, the lyrics, the emotion, everything about it connected with people across the world who had faced their own losses. It became one of the most powerful and comforting songs he ever wrote, offering healing not just to himself, but to millions of listeners. After years of chaos and heartbreak, Clapton eventually found love in a way nobody expected. In 1998, at 53 years old, he met Melia, a 22-year-old administrative assistant he crossed paths with at a party in Columbus, Ohio, after one of his shows. Their connection wasn't loud or flashy. It was quiet, calm, and surprisingly real, something he hadn't felt in years. They kept things private for a year, letting their relationship grow without cameras or gossip swirling around them. By 1999, they stepped into the public eye as a couple, but this time Clapton wasn't chasing drama. He was chasing peace. On January 1st, 2002, they got married in a simple ceremony at St. Mary Magdalene Church in Ripley, the same village where Clapton was born. It was like he closed one chapter and started another right where everything began. Together, Clapton and Melia built the family he had always hoped for, raising 3 daughters who brought him comfort, joy, and stability after decades of turmoil and reinvention. Their home became the calm he had needed for so long, giving him a chance to breathe and finally live life away from the chaos of fame. Now, at 80 years old, Eric Clapton has lived a life most musicians couldn't even imagine, a story filled with legendary wins, crushing losses, iconic music, and relationships that shaped him in ways fans still talk about today. And at the center of it all sits one of the most unforgettable connections in rock history, the bond he shared with George Harrison, a friendship so complex and powerful that people are still trying to untangle it. Now that Clapton is older, he's finally opening up, sharing pieces of that friendship he kept locked away for decades. He talked about George Harrison not just as someone he played music with during those rare moments when their worlds crossed, but as someone who felt like family. Clapton said straight up, "He was like a brother to me," but he also admitted there was always this quiet, unspoken rivalry between them that pushed both men harder than anyone ever realized. They were both incredible guitarists, but with totally different flavors. Clapton, fiery and blues-soaked, and Harrison, smooth, melodic, and guided by a spiritual touch that only he could pull off. Even with those differences, the respect between them was obvious every time they picked up their guitars. Clapton remembered those late-night jam sessions at Harrison's house where they'd swap licks, joke about their mistakes, and hype each other up to keep pushing the music to new places. But their friendship wasn't free from tension, and everyone knows the biggest pressure came from the moment Clapton fell in love with Pattie Boyd, Harrison's wife. In rock circles, it was the worst-kept secret of the era, and Clapton never pretended otherwise. "I couldn't help how I felt," he said. "I loved her with everything I had, and I think George knew it long before anyone else did. What could have destroyed most friendships turned into one of the strangest, most unforgettable bonds in music history. Clapton poured every bit of that emotional chaos into his music, creating songs like Layla that became anthems of heartbreak and longing. Meanwhile, Harrison, even though he was hurt, never fully shut Clapton out. Clapton admitted he carried guilt for years about how everything went down. "George was hurt and I knew it," he confessed. "But the incredible thing about him was that he forgave me." That forgiveness became the backbone of their connection. Harrison's kindness shaped their friendship in a way that stunned people watching from the outside. Even after Boyd left Harrison and later married Clapton, the two men still played together, sharing stages like nothing had ever happened. To the world it looked impossible, but for them, music was the bridge that fixed what life tried to break. Clapton said their bond grew even deeper in the later years, especially when Harrison fell ill. "When George was sick, I visited him as often as I could," Clapton shared, and you can almost feel the weight of those visits in his voice. He said they didn't need to fill the room with words. Sometimes they just sat together, letting the silence talk for them, the kind of silence only two people with real history can understand. George Harrison's passing in 2001 hit Clapton with a weight he still feels to this day. To honor him, Clapton organized the concert for George the very next year, a tribute filled with love, laughter, memories, and music that carried George's spirit into the room like he never left. Clapton has always said that putting that concert together was one of the proudest achievements of his entire life, because it let him celebrate the man who shaped him in ways he's still trying to explain. When Clapton looks back now, he admits that his connection with Harrison changed him more than almost any other relationship he ever had. "I've played with so many great musicians in my life," Clapton said, but George was special. He wasn't trying to outplay you or prove anything. He was just trying to make something beautiful. That simple approach hit Clapton hard, teaching him what music is truly meant to do. At 80, Clapton talks about Harrison with a softness that shows just how deep that bond ran. All the rivalry, the jealousy, the messy love triangle, the fame, none of that matters anymore. What's left is one truth Clapton carries like a treasure. Despite everything, George Harrison was, and always will be, one of the greatest friends he ever had. "George had this light about him," Clapton said. "Even when things were dark, he carried peace with him. I miss him every day, and the truth is, I'll never stop missing him." Those words alone tell the whole story. But Clapton's journey wasn't only shaped by friendships and music, it was shaped by his battles with himself. In the 1970s, his talent was nearly drowned out by addiction, and the lifestyle he fell into almost destroyed everything he had built. Drugs and alcohol wrapped around his life so tightly that even he began to fear his gift might vanish forever if he didn't fight back. Then, in 1982, something shifted inside him. A serious turning point that changed both his career and his personal life forever. He made the extremely difficult choice to walk away from alcohol and other recreational substances, and it wasn't quick, easy, or pretty. It was long, painful, and full of moments where he had to rebuild himself piece by piece, but he pushed through anyway. That decision became one of the biggest acts of strength in his entire story. Sobriety didn't just save his health, it gave him clarity, stability, and the emotional space to keep creating music that reached millions. Even after beating alcohol and drugs, Clapton still had one more battle to fight: nicotine. He had been a heavy smoker for decades, and the habit stayed long after everything else was gone. It wasn't until 1994, more than 10 years after quitting everything else, that he finally put out his last cigarette and walked away from one of the final chains tied to his past. Clapton's journey through addiction, recovery, and discipline shows a side of him fans often forget, Not the rock icon, not the guitar legend, but a human being fighting to keep his life from slipping away. His story of quitting drinking, drugs, and eventually cigarettes isn't just about recovery. It's about surviving storms most people never see, choosing to stand back up, and rebuilding a life that nearly collapsed. His resilience isn't just inspiring, it's proof that even the biggest legends have to fight for themselves sometimes, and those victories shape their art in ways the world never forgets.